On my stepdaughter's wedding day, I flew over 2,000 miles with a gift in a wooden box. 10 minutes after I arrived, my husband told me I'd be sitting at the back with the kids. Then his daughter knocked my gift off the table and called it cheap. So I left it there. 3 hours later, my phone started filling with missed calls. By the next morning, they had already been driving for 12 hours. They didn't stop until they reached my front door. People assume humiliation makes you react. It doesn't. Not when you've lived long enough to understand what reactions cost. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is nothing at all. The wedding venue sat just outside Raleigh, North Carolina, in what used to be a tobacco warehouse, the kind of place that had been converted into a rustic event space, brick walls, string lights across the ceiling, long wooden farm tables lined with white runners and mason jars full of wildflowers. Ashley loved that style. I knew because I had seen the spreadsheets. For the past 6 months, she had sent them to me: florists, caterers, rental chairs, linen upgrades. She never asked directly for help, but she knew I'd look through them. Old habits from my banking career. I couldn't help checking numbers. I had flown in from Denver that morning. 2,000 miles and a layover in Dallas. After landing in Raleigh, I picked up a rental car from the airport and drove straight to the venue, still wearing the navy travel blazer I'd left home in before sunrise. The wooden box sat on the passenger seat beside me the entire drive. Walnut. Hand-polished. Simple brass latch. It wasn't decorative. It wasn't flashy. But it mattered. I carried it with both hands when I walked into the reception hall. Inside, people were already setting up. The wedding coordinator was checking place cards, while a bartender arranged glassware behind a temporary bar. I spotted Mark almost immediately. My husband stood near the front tables talking with his mother, Linda. Linda saw me first. Her smile lasted exactly half a second before turning polite and distant. Mark walked toward me. No hug. Just a glance at the box. "You made it," he said. I said I would. He nodded, then lowered his voice. "Listen," he said quietly, "I already arranged the seating chart." That sentence alone was enough to tell me something was wrong. "All right," I said. "Mom agreed too," he added. Of course she had. Linda believed family hierarchy worked like a church pew: blood in the front, everyone else behind. "You'll sit at the back," Mark said, "with the kids." For a moment, I simply looked at him. "With the kids?" "It's just easier," he said quickly. "Ashley wants family up front." I glanced across the room. The front tables were already marked. Parents. Grandparents. Siblings. 8 years of marriage apparently didn't qualify as family. Linda watched from across the hall, satisfied. Before I could say anything, Ashley walked over. She looked exactly the way brides are supposed to look: perfect hair, white dress, makeup done professionally. For a brief second, I saw the girl she used to be at 14, sitting at my kitchen counter after school eating cereal from the box. Then she noticed the gift. "What's that?" she asked. "A wedding present," I said. Her expression shifted. "You didn't need to bring anything." "I wanted to." She shrugged. "Well, leave it on the gift table." I set the box down gently. Ashley studied it. No ribbon. No decorative wrapping. Just wood. Then she laughed. "Let me guess," she said loudly enough for 2 bridesmaids nearby to hear. "Some sentimental thing." Before I could answer, she pushed the box with the back of her hand. It slid across the table edge and dropped to the floor with a sharp wooden crack. "We don't need any cheap thing from you," she said. The room went quiet. One of the bridesmaids froze mid-sip. Someone near the bar muttered something under their breath. Mark didn't move. Linda didn't move either. I looked down at the box. The lid had stayed closed. For a moment, I thought about picking it up. Then I noticed the wedding coordinator watching from across the room. Witnesses matter. Quietly, I turned to her. "Would you mind keeping that with the other gifts?" I said. She nodded carefully. Ashley stared at me clearly, waiting for an argument. I didn't give her one. Instead, I said something simple. "You're right." That confused her more than anger would have. Without another word, I walked toward the exit. Behind me, I heard Mark call my name. "Claire." I kept walking. Outside, the afternoon air felt cooler. The parking lot stretched across gravel and asphalt toward a row of oak trees. My rental car sat near the far end where I had parked earlier. I opened the door, sat behind the wheel, and closed it. For a moment, I just sat there, hands resting on the steering wheel. No tears, just quiet. Then I started the engine. I drove straight back toward Raleigh-Durham Airport. By the time the ceremony started, I was already standing in the security line. And somewhere behind me in a reception hall filled with flowers and champagne glasses, a walnut box was still sitting quietly on the gift table, waiting. The plane left Raleigh just after sunset. By the time we reached cruising altitude, the lights of the city had already faded beneath a blanket of clouds. From the window seat, everything below looked small and distant, like problems that belonged to someone else. I kept the shade half open anyway. Old habit. When you spend 20 years working in banking, you learn to watch things closely. Numbers, patterns, people. Especially people. The man sitting beside me fell asleep before we even reached 10,000 feet. His head leaned against the seat mouth, slightly open, breathing slow and steady. I envied that kind of sleep. My phone buzzed once in airplane mode as the last signal disappeared. A voicemail notification. Mark. Of course. I didn't listen to it. Not yet. Instead, I leaned back and closed my eyes. Flying always gave me too much time to think. 8 years earlier, when Mark and I met, I wasn't looking for another marriage. I had already survived one. By 35, I was managing a regional bank branch in Denver. Long hours, mortgage approvals, small business loans, endless paperwork. The kind of work that trains you to notice details other people miss. Interest rates changing 0.5%. Signatures that didn't quite match. People who smiled too easily when money was involved. Mark came into the branch one afternoon asking about refinancing his house. He was polite, nervous in that quiet way some men get when dealing with financial paperwork. Divorced, he told me later. Trying to rebuild things with his daughter, Ashley. She was 14 when I first met her. Defensive. Sharp. But underneath all that, she was still a kid who wanted stability. For a while, we had that. Ashley came to dinner twice a week. She'd sit at the kitchen counter doing homework while I cooked. Sometimes she'd ask me questions about school, about college applications, about life in general. Once after a volleyball game, she accidentally called me Mom. The second the word left her mouth, she froze. I pretended I hadn't heard it. Later that night, Mark cried in the kitchen. Said it meant everything to him. Things changed slowly after Linda started visiting more often. At first it was small comments. She's not really family. Be careful mixing finances with second marriages. Blood should stay with blood. Mark pushed back in the beginning. But people who hate conflict rarely win against people who enjoy creating it. Eventually he stopped arguing. Then he stopped noticing. Or maybe he noticed and decided it was easier not to. I began seeing the signs about 3 years into the marriage. They were small. Too small for most people to worry about. A credit card statement addressed to me that I didn't remember opening. A refinance document Mark asked me to sign quickly before the bank closes. An email from a lender asking about a joint account I had never approved. When I asked questions, Mark always had explanations. Temporary. Just paperwork. Nothing serious. Maybe he believed those explanations himself. But numbers don't lie. One evening after Mark had gone to bed, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop and started looking through everything. Bank statements, loan records, credit reports. I wasn't angry. I was curious. And curiosity is dangerous when you know how financial systems work. It didn't take long to see the pattern. My name had been used to secure 2 credit lines connected to a property Linda owned. Technically legal. But only because the paperwork had been structured carefully enough to avoid obvious fraud. Still, my signature had appeared on documents I didn't remember signing. That bothered me. The next morning before work, I called a lawyer. Not because I wanted a fight, because I wanted protection. Over the next several months, I quietly copied every document I could find. Emails, loan records, statements. Everything went into a digital folder. Then a second one stored with my attorney, just in case. I never confronted Mark. There was no reason to yet. People reveal more when they believe you haven't noticed. And Mark kept revealing things, especially when Ashley's wedding planning started. Suddenly, there were more documents, more financial questions, more conversations about family contributions. 3 weeks before the wedding, I bought the walnut box. Inside it, I placed a letter, and beneath that letter, something far more important. When I finished packing it, I closed the latch and left it on the kitchen counter. Mark walked in from the garage a few minutes later. "What's that?" he asked. "A wedding gift," I said. "For Ashley." "Yes." He smiled. "That's thoughtful." I looked at him for a moment. Then I smiled back. "Yes," I said quietly. "It is." The cabin lights dimmed as the plane crossed into Colorado airspace. My phone vibrated again. Another voicemail notification. Then another. By the time the plane touched down in Denver, there were 9 missed calls waiting, all from Mark. I finally listened to the first one while walking through the airport. His voice sounded tight. "Claire, call me back." The second message was shorter. "You need to call me now." The third message came 20 minutes later, and by then his voice sounded different. Less angry, more afraid. By the time I stepped outside Denver International Airport, the night air had turned sharp and cold. It was just after 10. The parking shuttle dropped me near the long-term lot where I'd left my car that morning before flying to North Carolina. The same silver sedan I'd driven for years waited exactly where I'd parked it. Some things in life stay predictable. People usually don't. I sat in the driver's seat for a moment before starting the engine. 9 missed calls. 3 voicemails. 2 text messages. All from Mark. The texts were simple. "Call me." Then 10 minutes later, "Claire, this is serious." I didn't answer right away. Instead, I started the car and pulled out of the airport lot. Denver traffic at that hour was light. The highway lights stretched ahead in long, quiet lines. My house was about 40 minutes away. Halfway there, my phone buzzed again. Mark. I let it ring. Then it stopped. A few seconds later, another call came through. This time from a number I didn't recognize. I answered. "Hello?" There was a pause on the other end. Then a male voice said carefully, "Claire." "Yes, it's Ryan, Ashley's fiancé." Well, husband now, I assumed. I hadn't expected to hear from him. "You left pretty quickly," he said. "I had a flight to catch." Another pause. I figured he said, "Listen, I thought you should know something." The highway hummed beneath my tires as I drove. "I'm listening." Ryan exhaled slowly. "I wasn't there when she knocked the box down," he said. "I was outside with a few friends. But when I came back in, people were standing around the gift table." "What happened?" I asked. "She opened it." "Of course she did," Ryan continued. "At first she was joking about it. You know, making comments about how dramatic it was that you left the gift. I could picture the scene easily. Ashley loved an audience. But when she opened the box, Ryan said the room got quiet. "What was inside?" he asked. I didn't answer. Instead, I asked him something else. "What did you see?" Ryan hesitated. "There was a letter on top," he said. "She started reading it. And at first she looked annoyed. Then his voice lowered. But about halfway through, she stopped talking." I turned off the highway and onto the smaller road that led toward my neighborhood. Streetlights passed slowly across the windshield. "What happened next?" I asked. There was an envelope under the letter, Ryan said. She opened it. And documents. Legal papers. "Your husband grabbed them," Ryan continued, "but not before I saw the first page." I said nothing. Ryan sounded unsettled. "It looked like some kind of trust," he said. "For Ashley." "That's right." Another pause. "You set it up." "Yes." Ryan breathed out slowly. "That's not the part that upset him," he said. "No," I said quietly. "I didn't think so." The car rolled to a stop at a red light. Ryan continued. There was another document clipped behind it. My fingers tightened slightly on the steering wheel. "And what did that say?" I asked. Ryan hesitated. "I didn't read the whole thing," he said carefully. "But it mentioned loan agreements." My light turned green. I kept driving. "Mark went pale," Ryan said. "Linda too." "And Ashley?" I asked. She looked confused. That sounded about right. "She kept asking what the papers meant," Ryan said. "But your husband just kept saying the same thing." "What?" "That it wasn't supposed to happen like this." I almost smiled. Ryan continued. "They left the reception about 20 minutes later. Both of them." "Yes." "Where did they go?" "I don't know," Ryan said. "But before they left, Mark tried calling you." I noticed. Ryan's voice shifted slightly. More serious now. "Claire, can I ask you something?" "You just did." "Did you plan this?" The honesty of the question made me respect him a little. "Yes," I said. He was quiet for a few seconds. "I thought so." We drove in silence together for a moment, him somewhere in North Carolina, me crossing through the quiet streets of Denver. Finally, Ryan spoke again. "There's one more thing you should know." "What's that?" "I heard Linda tell Mark they needed to talk to you in person." I turned onto my street. "And—" Ryan didn't hesitate this time. "She said tonight." I pulled into my driveway just before 11. My house sat at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac in a neighborhood that looked almost identical to a dozen others across the Denver suburbs. 2-story homes, trimmed lawns, front porches with lights that turned on automatically at dusk. Predictable. Orderly. Safe. That had been the whole point when I bought it 6 years earlier. After my divorce, I wanted something simple. No drama. No surprises. Funny how life ignores those preferences. I turned off the engine and sat in the car for a moment, listening to the quiet hum of the cooling engine. Ryan's words still lingered in my mind. "She said tonight." Linda didn't do anything casually. If she wanted to talk to me in person, it meant one thing. She was scared. My phone buzzed again. Mark. This time I answered. "Claire?" he said immediately, relief and anger tangled together in his voice. "Where are you?" "Home." Silence. Then home. In Denver. Another long pause. "You already flew back." "Yes." His breathing shifted slightly on the line. "Listen," he said, "we need to talk." "We are talking." "Not like this." "Then like what?" "In person." "Of course." I leaned back against the driver's seat. "That sounds inconvenient," I said. His voice hardened. "What you did tonight." "What I did," I interrupted. "Yes." I waited. But he didn't finish the sentence. Because he knew. Even if he didn't want to admit it yet. "What did you tell Ashley?" he asked instead. "The truth." "You blindsided her." "No," I said calmly. I protected myself. He exhaled sharply. "Claire, those documents are accurate." "You didn't have to do that at her wedding." "I didn't," I said. "You did." "No, Mark, I gave her a gift." Another pause. "What you did with it after that wasn't my responsibility." His voice lowered. "You set up a trust." "Yes." "In her name." "Yes." "And you attached legal documents accusing me of financial misconduct." "Not accusing," I corrected. "Documenting." He didn't speak for several seconds. Then he said something that confirmed everything I already knew. "You should have talked to me first." I almost laughed. Mark 1 said gently, "I tried." "You signed those papers." "I signed what you gave me. And now you're pretending." "I'm not pretending anything." The porch light switched on automatically as I stepped out of the car. Motion sensor. I walked toward the front door while still holding the phone. "Do you know what bothered me most?" I said. He didn't answer. "Not the loans. Not the accounts. Not even the way my name appeared on documents I never approved. It was the assumption I continued." "What assumption?" "That I wouldn't notice." Silence. Inside the house, I set my keys on the kitchen counter. Mark finally spoke again. "You've made a mess of things." "No," I said. "I clarified them." In the background, I heard another voice. "Linda." muffled at first, then louder. Ask her where she is. Mark covered the phone briefly. I could still hear her. Where is she? Linda demanded. Denver, Mark muttered. There was a sharp intake of breath. Then Linda's voice came through clearly. Good, she said. Mark sounded confused. Good. Yes. The word came out cold and decisive. We'll go there. Mark hesitated. That's a long drive. Then start driving. He returned to the phone. You heard that? Yes. We're coming to talk to you. Tonight. Yes. I looked out through the kitchen window into the quiet street. Every house dark. Every lawn still. How long do you think that drive is, Mark? I asked. About 18 hours. That's what I thought. His voice turned tight again. You'd better still be there when we arrive. I smiled slightly. Oh, I will be. Then I hung up. Across the country, in a parking lot outside a wedding venue that was probably still half full of confused guests, Mark and Linda were getting into a car, beginning a drive that neither of them had expected to make. 18 hours. For a conversation they should have had years ago. The next morning I woke before sunrise. Old habits from my banking days die slowly. When you spend years opening a branch at 7 a.m., your body learns to wake before the world does. The house was quiet. I made coffee and stood by the kitchen window while the machine finished brewing. Outside, the neighborhood still slept under a thin layer of early Colorado frost. The streetlights had not yet turned off. 18 hours. That was the number Mark had given me. Raleigh to Denver. If they left around 8 the night before, they would arrive sometime late that afternoon. People imagine those hours would feel tense for the person waiting. But the truth is, once something inevitable starts moving toward you, waiting becomes strangely peaceful. Because the decision has already been made. I poured coffee into a mug and sat at the kitchen table. My phone buzzed again around 9. This time it wasn't Mark. It was Ashley. I stared at the screen for a moment before answering. Hello. Her voice sounded different from the night before. Smaller. Claire. Yes. There was a pause. I wanted to ask you something. Go ahead. Is it true? She asked. Is what true? The trust. Yes. Another pause. Ryan's voice murmured somewhere in the background. Ashley must have stepped away from him before calling. Why? She asked quietly. That question carried more weight than anger ever could. Because when you were 14, I said slowly, you told me you wanted a house with a big kitchen someday. She didn't speak. You said you wanted a place where people felt safe, I continued. I remembered that. Her breathing shifted. I thought you hated me, she said. I don't hate you. Then why the legal documents? I leaned back in the chair. That part wasn't for you. Silence filled the line. For Dad, she asked eventually. Yes. Her voice tightened. Ryan says he thinks something is wrong with the paperwork. He's correct. Did Dad do something illegal? That's a conversation you should have with him. She exhaled slowly. He won't tell me. I believed that. Mark avoided difficult conversations like they were potholes in the road. Eventually, Ashley spoke again. They left last night. I know. You know. He told me. They've been driving all night, she said. That sounds exhausting. Ashley hesitated again. I didn't know about any of it, she said quietly. I believe you. Her voice cracked slightly. I shouldn't have said that about your gift. No, I agreed calmly. You shouldn't have. She didn't defend herself. I was angry, she said. At what? I thought you were trying to control things. That would be ironic, I said. She didn't ask what I meant. Instead, she said something that surprised me. Ryan said you were probably protecting yourself. He's perceptive. Another long pause. Finally, Ashley asked, what happens when they get there? I looked around my quiet kitchen. Coffee mug. Sunlight beginning to creep across the table. Normal things. Then we talk, I said, and if they don't want to, then I listen. And after that depends on whether anyone decides to tell the truth. Ashley's voice lowered. Claire, If Dad really used your name. I waited. I didn't know. I know. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said something I hadn't expected to hear. I think Ryan's right about one thing. What's that? You didn't leave the box there by accident. No, I said. I didn't. The call ended a few minutes later. Around noon, Mark sent a text. Crossing into Nebraska. No apology. No explanation. Just a location update. I replied with a single word. Drive safely. The afternoon passed slowly. I cleaned the kitchen. Answered a few emails. Walked through the house, making sure everything looked exactly the way I wanted it to. By 5 o'clock, the sun had begun dropping toward the mountains. And somewhere on the long highway stretching across the Midwest, a car carrying 2 very tired people was getting closer. Closer to the conversation they had been avoiding for years. They arrived just after 6 in the evening. I saw the headlights first sweeping slowly across the front of the house before stopping at the curb. The engine stayed running for a few seconds before finally shutting off. Through the front window, I watched the car doors open. Mark stepped out first. He looked older than he had the day before. 18 hours in a car will do that to a person. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair flattened in places where it had pressed against the seat, and the confidence he usually carried had been replaced by something tighter. Behind him, Linda climbed out of the passenger side. She still moved with the same rigid posture she always had, back straight, chin slightly lifted, but even from the window I could see the strain in her face. They stood there for a moment looking at the house. My house. Then Mark walked up the driveway and knocked. 3 sharp raps. I opened the door before he could knock again. For a second, none of us spoke. The last time I had seen him, we were standing in a wedding venue in North Carolina. Now he stood on my porch in Denver after an 18-hour drive, holding the same tension he'd carried in his voice the night before. Claire, he said. Mark. Linda stepped forward slightly. May we come in? Her voice was calm, but I could hear the effort behind it. I stepped aside. Of course. They entered the house slowly, like visitors unsure of the rules. The living room looked the same as it always did. Gray couch, oak coffee table, the framed photograph of the mountains above the fireplace. Linda noticed the photo immediately. You redecorated, she said. No, I replied. You've just never been here before. She didn't answer. Mark stayed standing near the door. We didn't drive 18 hours for small talk, he said. I assumed that. I gestured toward the dining table. Sit. They sat. I remained standing for a moment, then took the chair across from them. For a few seconds, no one spoke. Then Mark leaned forward. What exactly are you trying to do? He asked. Clarify things. With legal threats. With documentation. His jaw tightened. You embarrassed Ashley. No, I said evenly. Ashley embarrassed herself. Linda's eyes flashed. She's a young woman who made a mistake. She's 30. Linda didn't like that answer. That's not the point, she said sharply. The point, I replied, is that none of this started at that wedding. Mark leaned back in the chair. You could have talked to me first. I did. You never mentioned lawyers. I mentioned questions, I said. You ignored them. Linda folded her hands together on the table. This is about money, she said. No, I corrected. This is about my name appearing on financial documents I didn't authorize. Mark's gaze dropped to the table. You signed them. I signed what you gave me. You're twisting things. I reached across the table and slid a folder toward him. Inside were printed copies, emails, statements, loan agreements, the same documents I had stored with my attorney months earlier. Mark opened the folder. His eyes moved slowly across the first page. Then the second. Linda leaned closer to see. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, Mark looked up. You had no right to show that to Ashley. I didn't, I said. I gave her a gift. Linda's voice sharpened. You attached accusations. I attached facts. The room went quiet again. Then Mark said the one thing I had been waiting to hear. I never meant for it to go that far. I leaned back in my chair. That's the problem, I said. You never meant anything. Mark didn't argue. Instead, he stared at the papers again. Behind him, the last light of the evening faded through the window. And for the first time since they arrived, Linda looked uncertain. For a long moment, the only sound in the room was the quiet hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. Mark kept staring at the documents in front of him like they might somehow rearrange themselves into a different story. They didn't. Numbers rarely do. Linda was the first to speak. "You're overreacting," she said. Her voice was steady, but it carried the brittle tone of someone used to controlling a conversation. "These are ordinary financial arrangements." "No," I said calmly, "they're not." Mark didn't look up. Linda pressed on. "Families help each other. That's how these things work." "Families also ask permission," I replied. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "You signed the paperwork." "I signed documents that were presented as something else." "That's interpretation." "That's documentation." I tapped the top page of the folder. "The dates are clear." Mark exhaled slowly and rubbed his forehead. "Claire," he said quietly, "what do you want?" The question hung in the air for a moment. Linda looked at him sharply. "Mark." "No," he said. "Let her answer." I folded my hands on the table. "What I want is simple." Linda leaned back, her expression tightening. "This should be interesting." I ignored the comment. "First, I said every loan or credit line connected to my name gets closed or refinanced within 60 days. Mark nodded slowly. "That's reasonable." "Second," I continued, "my name is removed from any property or financial document related to your mother." Linda stiffened. "That property belongs to me." "Then you shouldn't need my signature." She didn't reply. "Third," I said, "any future financial agreements between us happen with legal review from both sides." Mark looked tired now. "That sounds expensive." "It's cheaper than lawsuits." Linda's patience snapped. "You're threatening us." "No," I said evenly. "I'm setting boundaries." She leaned forward across the table. "You've already humiliated this family once." "No," I corrected. "You did that yourselves." Mark closed the folder slowly. "And if we agree to all this, then everything stays exactly where it is," I said. Linda frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means the trust fund remains in Ashley's name." Mark looked up sharply. "You're still giving her that?" "Yes." Linda scoffed. "After what she said to you?" I met her eyes. "The gift wasn't for her behavior yesterday. It was for her future." Mark looked genuinely confused now. "You went through all this trouble," he said, "and you're still giving her the money." "Yes." "Why?" "Because Ashley made a mistake." Linda crossed her arms. "And we didn't." "You made a choice," I said. Mark stared at the papers again. For a long moment, the room stayed silent. Then he said something I hadn't expected. "You're leaving me." It wasn't a question. I considered that. "Yes," I said. Linda let out a sharp breath. "So that's what this is really about." "No," I said quietly. "This is about accountability." Mark looked up slowly. "You could have destroyed us with this." "I know." "Why didn't you?" I leaned back in the chair. "Because revenge doesn't fix anything." Linda gave a short, skeptical laugh. "Then what does—" I stood up and walked to the kitchen counter. From there, I could see both of them clearly. "Consequences," I said. The words settled into the room. Mark finally nodded. Slowly. "I'll fix the loans," he said. "I'll close everything connected to your name." Linda looked at him in disbelief. "Mark." "It's done," he said quietly. He turned back to me. "And the trust—" "It stays," I said. "For Ashley." He studied me for a moment. Then he gave a tired nod. Outside, the sky had turned fully dark. And for the first time since the night before, the tension in the room began to loosen. After Mark agreed to the terms, the room became strangely quiet. Not the tense silence we'd been sitting in all evening. Something softer. Something tired. Linda didn't speak again for several minutes. She sat back in her chair, arms crossed tightly, eyes moving between Mark and me, as if trying to calculate how the ground had shifted beneath her. Mark closed the folder slowly and pushed it across the table. "I'll contact the bank tomorrow," he said. His voice had lost the sharp edge it carried the night before. I'll start closing everything tied to your name." "That would be a good start," I replied. He nodded once, almost to himself. Linda finally stood. "I'm getting some air." She walked toward the front door without waiting for anyone to answer. The door opened and closed with a quiet click behind her. Mark watched the door for a moment before looking back at me. "She hates losing control," he said. "I know." He leaned back in the chair. "You could have ruined us," he said again. "I wasn't interested in ruining anyone. That's not how it felt last night." "That's because last night was the first time anyone in that room realized there were consequences." Mark looked down at his hands. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he asked the question I had expected since the beginning. "Why leave the box there?" I considered that. Because the truth was simple, even if the answer wasn't. Because if I had taken it with me, I said, you would have ignored it. Mark didn't argue. "You needed to see it," I continued, "all of it. And Ashley, she needed to see it too." He nodded slowly. "She called you this morning, didn't she?" "Yes." "What did she say?" "That she didn't know." Mark sighed. "She really didn't. I believe that." He rubbed his face tiredly. "Ryan's not happy with any of us." "That sounds reasonable." Mark let out a small breath that might have been a laugh. "He told Ashley something last night." "What?" "That she threw her future on the floor." I said nothing, because that was exactly what had happened. After another moment, Mark stood up. "I should probably go check on my mother. That might be wise." He walked toward the door, then stopped halfway there. "Claire." "Yes." "I am sorry." The words sounded unfamiliar in his mouth. Not rehearsed. Not defensive. Just tired. "I know you are," I said. He nodded once. Then he stepped outside. The door closed again, leaving the house quiet. I walked to the kitchen and rinsed my coffee mug from earlier that morning. The sink water ran warm over my hands while I watched the faint reflection of the room in the window. Outside, Mark and Linda stood near their car under the porch light. They were talking quietly. For the first time in years, they were having a conversation without me absorbing the consequences. Eventually, the car started. The headlights swept across the yard before disappearing down the street. I turned off the kitchen light. Later that night, my phone buzzed once more. "Ashley." I answered. "Claire." "Yes." Her voice sounded calmer now. I wanted to say something. "Go ahead." "I was wrong yesterday," she said. "I know." "I shouldn't have said that about your gift." "No," I agreed. "You shouldn't have." She took a breath. "Ryan told me what the trust really means. And thank you." The words sounded unfamiliar to her, but they were honest. "You're welcome," I said. After we hung up, I stepped outside onto the back porch. The air was cold and quiet. In the distance, the mountains were barely visible under the moonlight. People think revenge is loud, angry, destructive. But the truth is, the most powerful revenge is often quiet. It's walking away with your dignity intact. It's letting the truth do the work for you. And at this point in my life, I had finally learned something important. Silence isn't surrender. Sometimes it's preparation. If this story made you reflect on respect boundaries or the quiet strength it takes to stand up for yourself, I invite you to share your thoughts below. And if you enjoy stories about resilience, justice, and real-life choices, consider subscribing so you don't miss the next one. Your voice